Okay, so we're going to look at the quadratic formula. And this is going to be a method that we can use to solve any quadratic equation. So sometimes we're going to run into quadratic equations that aren't factorable. Like you can't, all your methods for factoring don't work. You could always use the quadratic formula. So if you can't factor it, we usually go with the quadratic formula. That's the point. Even if you can factor it, some people just like to use the quadratic formula all the time. I recommend factoring to solve. Here are the steps. First of all, here's the formula over here. All right, so you're going to have to memorize that formula. We'll use it so much that you'll start to get used to it and remember it. So these are the steps. First, rearrange the equation so that it is equal to 0 and written in standard form.
Did you use the? I did, yeah.
So it'll look something like this.
I used it for alpha.
All right. The next thing you do is you're going to identify the A, B, and C from your standard form and substitute those values into the quadratic formula. And then finally simplify that expression. And typically, you'll get 2 answers. Not always, but most of the time. All right, so let's put this thing to use. So we have our, let me use the laser pointer here. We have the standard form over here, and it's equal to 0. So maybe it factors, maybe it doesn't, but we're just going to go ahead and use the quadratic formula. So first I'm going to say A equals 1, B equals -5, and C equals -36. And I got those from 1, -5, and -36. So now I take that quadratic formula, x equals, and first I'm just going to put a bunch of blank parentheses. So you got to use parentheses here. So notice wherever there was a letter like B, I put a blank set of parentheses. A B, I put a blank set of parentheses. A and then C, I take both of those out and leave them empty. And then A here, I leave it empty. Now what goes in these parentheses are these numbers. So since this was a B here and here, I'm going to put -5 in here and here. So we've got -5, we've got -5. Then A was 1, so 1 goes there and there. And then C was -36. So I put in a -36. I decided to make a video because I'm subbing for a class and they weren't talking at all. And then now they're talking, but it's okay. I think you can hear me. Okay, -36. So now I'm going to start simplifying. The first thing is the minus and -5 becomes a +5, plus or minus underneath the square root. -5 squared is 25. Now for these 3 numbers, you're multiplying them together. I decide the sign first. I see a negative times a positive times a negative. So a negative times a negative is a positive. The whole thing is going to turn out to be positive. So I decide that first. So I know it's a plus. Now I'm just going to multiply these 3 numbers together. So 36 times 4 times 1. So I think that is 36 times 2 is 72. And then times 2 again would be 144. Let's make sure that that's right. You get a calculator. 36 times 4 is 144. Okay, and then on the bottom here, I do the 2 times the 1, so I get a 2. Next thing to simplify is you add these numbers together under the square root. So now x equals 5 plus or minus 25 plus 144, which is 169, all over 2. The next thing you do is try to see if you can square root 169. If you can't square root it, maybe you could even simplify the square root. So now we get to x equals 5 plus or minus the square root of 169, I believe, is 13. So we get plus or minus 13 over 2. And now it separates into 2 answers. You have x equals 5 plus 13 over 2, and x equals 5 minus 13 over 2. So I simplify both of those. I get 5 plus 13 is 18 over 2, which is 9. And then 5 minus 13 over 2, so that's going to be, let's see, we got negative 8 over 2, which will be negative 4. So those are the x's that make this a true statement. If I take negative 4 and I plug it in here and here, I'll get 0 equals 0. If I take 9 and plug it in here and here, I'll also get 0 equals 0. So those are our solutions. You can write them as x equals 9 and negative 4. All right, let's look at another one here. So we notice that this one is not in the proper form yet. It's not equal to 0, so I'm going to add 9x to both sides of the equation. So if I add 9x to both sides of the equation, over here cancels out and I get 0. Okay, that was weird. I get 0. On this other side, I cannot add, this is a linear, it's x to the first. I can't add it with an x squared, and I can't add it with just a number, so I write this out, and I write it in standard form. 2x squared plus 9x minus 5. Now, maybe I could factor it, maybe not, but I'm just going to go straight into quadratic formula. So my a is 2, my b is 9, and my c equals negative 5. My iPad's waiting out here, so I got to erase all these marks I just made. My c equals negative 5. So I go x equals, oh my gosh, negative, this is freaking out, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4a times c all over 2a. So I'm going to put in my b here and here. I'm going to put in my a here and here, and put in my c here. All right, so if I start simplifying, I get negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 81. And then I have a negative times a positive times a negative. That's going to make a positive. So I decide that first. Then I multiply the numbers. 4 times 2 is 8. And then 8 times 5 is 40. All over 4. All right, so then I get x equals negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 81 plus 40 is going to be 121 over 4. Then that means that x will be equal to negative 9 plus or minus 11, because that's the square root of 121. So then that separates into 2. X equals negative 9 plus 11 over 4, or x equals negative 9 minus 11 over 4. So we get x equals 11 minus 9 is 2, 2 over 4, which is reduces to 1/2. It's one solution. Or over here, negative 9 minus 11 gives me negative 20 over 4, which then becomes negative 5 when I divide negative 20 by 4. All right, so these were nice. The square roots were nice numbers. What do you need? What do you need? Oh, it's right there. It's okay. All right, so number 3. This one is already set up where it's equal to 0. And then we can do our quadratic formula here. So I've got x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2 times a. So my A in this case is -1, my B is -2, and my C is 7. Keep in mind, I get these numbers from here. -1 is A, -2 is B, and 7 is C. So now I fill this stuff in. So I got -2, -2. A is -1, -1, and then C is 7. So we start simplifying. This becomes 2 plus or minus the square root of 4 plus. Again, it's a plus because we have a negative times a negative times a positive. So it's going to be a plus here. 7 times 4 times 1 is 28, all over -2 when I do 2 times -1. So now x equals 2 plus or minus the square root of 32, all over -2. Now 32 doesn't have a perfect square root, so I start to simplify it. Whoops, let me do this, sorry. That got sloppy. Plus or minus the square root of, since 32 doesn't square root, I break it up into two numbers times each other. Oh my gosh. It's getting crazy. All right, so 32 is 16 times 2. Two numbers times each other, where at least I can square root one of them. 32 is not a perfect square, so I can't square root it to a whole number. So I break it up into the square root of 16 times the square root of 2. If I multiply these back together, I can multiply them because they're square roots. They come back to this square root of 32. So I break it up into two square roots times each other, where since I can't square root 32, maybe I could at least square root one of these. Oh yeah, I can square root the 16. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I get 2 plus or minus the square root of 16 is 4 times the square root of 2, all over -2. All right, so I can then simplify. 2 divides into all of these. So 2 divides into that, it becomes a -1. 2 divides into that, it becomes a 1. 2 divides into that, becomes a 2. So this will be 1 plus or minus 2 root 2 over -1. So you can write your answers like that. Remember that that's two answers, or you could separate them. You could say x equals 1 plus 2 root 2 over -1, or x equals 1 minus 2 root 2 over -1. You can write it either way. Okay, guys, too loud. It's okay. All right, so now solve using quadratic formula. So this one, again, it's not equal to 0. So I'm going to add 16 to both sides here. Those cancel over here, and I get equals 0. Now this 16, I can't add it to either of these because they have x's in them, so I just put it at the end. I have x squared minus 8x plus 16. All right, so now I'm going to do my quadratic formula. I know that a equals 1, b equals -8, c equals 16. So I say x equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2 times a. So that's going to simplify to 8 plus or minus square root of 64 minus this time, because I have a negative times a positive times a positive. When you multiply those together, you end up with a negative. So now it's minus. And then 16 times 4 is 64, all over 2. So now when I do this, I get x equals 8 plus or minus the square root of 0 over 2. And the square root of 0 is 0, so I get x equals 8 plus or minus 0 over 2. Remember I said sometimes you only get one answer? This would be one of those times. I only get 8 over 2. Which reduces to x equals 4. Why do I only get one answer? It's this part right here. When this becomes a 0, if you 8 plus 0 gives you 8, and 8 minus 0 also gives you 8. So when this number here is 0, that you add and subtract, if you add or subtract 0, it's not going to change anything, right? It's not going to move the 8, so that's why you don't get two different answers. All right, now we're going to take a second and talk about something called the discriminant. That's just the part here of the quadratic formula that's just under the square root, okay? So we're just going to do this part right here, and we're going to look at what that tells us. That's going to tell us some stuff. If the part under the square root, so that's what the discriminant is, the part under the square root, that can be used to determine the number of solutions a quadratic equation has. You can just tell. So like we said before here, when that stuff under this square root, this whole part here turns out to be 0, you end up only having one solution. Okay, so that's D, the discriminant, the part under the square root. If it's bigger than 0, there are two solutions. So if you get a positive underneath that root, like we did here, right? We got down to this part as a positive number under the square root, a positive number under the square root, a positive number under the square root. Then we get two solutions, as you see, for each one of these. We got two answers. We got two answers. We got two answers, but when the part under the square root is 0, we only got one answer. So if the part under the square root is 0, there's only one answer. If the part under the square root is less than 0, there are no solutions. This is the new thing here, that there are no solutions here. When the part under the discriminant part is negative, then we have no solutions when the part under the square root is negative. So that's how we know the number of solutions. So we don't have to do the whole quadratic formula. We can just do the part under the square root. So find the discriminant and how many solutions it has. So the discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. So we'll call it D for discriminant. D equals 5 squared minus 4 times 1 times 4. Remember, because A is 1, B is 5, C is 4. So if I do this out, I get 25. And now this part right here, a negative times a positive will be a negative. So I know it's minus. 4 times 4 is 16. So the discriminant is 25 minus 16, which is 9. Therefore, there are two solutions. Okay, that's what that means. Now we'll do discriminant for this guy. So discriminant equals, it's just the part under the square root, right? So it's just this part right here. We're finding out if that's positive, negative, or 0. So b squared minus 4 times a times c. Oh no, I'm trying to finish this up, but it's getting crazy. This pen is wigging out. Times a times c, which is 9. All right, so the discriminant is 144. And then minus, because you got a negative times a positive times a positive. Let's see, 9 times 4 is 36. 36 times 4, is that going to be bigger than 144? No, it's exactly 144. So our discriminant is 0. So we have one solution. Discriminant of 0 means one solution. And we have a guest speaker here, Mr. Hill. Hi, Mr. Hill. We're on our last one. All right, so b squared minus 4ac. I bet you can tell this one's going to come out to be negative. Whoops, 5 squared, that's b squared. Oh my gosh, it won't let me finish without waking up. B squared minus 4 times a times c. I get 25. This is going to be a negative. A negative times a negative times a negative gives me a minus. 8 times 8 times
He just has like his Apple thing.
96, and then 25 minus 96 is negative 71, which means 0 solutions. And we'll talk about why that means 0 solutions in the future. Thank you. Have a nice day.